Hi, and welcome to Bioarchaeology and Climate Change 102. Like global temperatures, the topic of climate change has been increasingly hot in politics and the media for the past few decades. But what exactly is climate change? We'll start by saying what climate change is not. Climate change is not a concept created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. Sorry, President Trump, climate change is real, and it's affecting our environment in a very real way. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change refers to a change in the state of the climate that can be identified through statistical tests by changes in the mean and/or the variability of its properties, and that persists for an extended period, typically decades or longer. It refers to any change in climate over time, whether due to natural variability or as a result of human activity. Let's break that down. First things first, climate. Climate is actually different from weather, which varies day by day, or even hour by hour. Climate is the average of weather conditions in a specific area over a long period of time. So we could say that the climate of Antarctica is cold and dry, characterized by lots of snow and ice. Or could we? As previously mentioned, climate is changing worldwide, including in Antarctica. But how and why? What evidence is there that we should worry? Climate change does happen naturally, but humans have exponentially influenced the rate at which it occurs and the degree of change experienced. Earth's atmosphere is composed of several types of greenhouse gases that prevent infrared radiation from escaping the atmosphere, which warms the Earth. The most influential greenhouse gas that is influenced by human behavior is our friend carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide enters the atmosphere naturally as a result of decomposition, respiration, and ocean emissions. Humans significantly increase the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere through deforestation, the burning of fossil fuels, cement manufacturing, and the use of electricity. Carbon dioxide is one of the longest-lasting compounds in the atmosphere, meaning that it has a high warming potential. Any amount of CO2 emitted will remain in the atmosphere for thousands of years. If increased amounts are released, there's an increased concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, which in turn increases Earth's average temperatures. By this logic, scientists can determine that if CO2 emissions continue at the rate they are now, temperatures will continue to rise throughout the foreseeable future. As greenhouse gas concentrations increase and temperatures rise, different ecological responses can occur. As polar ice caps melt, sea levels rise, and the acidity of the water can change, affecting marine life. Ocean temperatures will also change due to the influx of cold water from the melting glaciers. This can alter the temperature of major currents that are necessary for warming parts of the world like Europe. Other factors include changes in levels of precipitation, increased prevalence of social inequality, pathogens, parasites, and diseases, all of which could influence human health, culture, and social interactions. Aside from using logic and statistical calculations to predict the effects of climate change on humans, scientists can study how past populations responded to climate change that they experienced. This provides a model so that we can hopefully avoid making some of the mistakes that past societies made, or we can be inspired by whatever they did to ensure their survival and quality of life. So how do we study climate change in the past? The most direct way of observing climate in the past is through the analysis of ice core samples. The way this works is basically a big, hollow, straw-like metal cylinder is drilled through an ice cap so that when it's brought back to the surface, it's holding a nice cylinder of ice, with the oldest ice at the bottom and the newest at the top. There should be lots of little air bubbles trapped throughout the sample. These little bubbles actually reflect the composition of the atmosphere at the time they were frozen. Researchers can analyze the chemical makeup of the bubbles for things like carbon dioxide levels and compare their results with those of the bubbles found in a different section of the ice core, allowing them to determine the composition of the atmosphere in the past and see how it's changed over time. Another cool way to look at climate change in the past is through dendrochronology. Remember when you were a kid and you learned that you could figure out how old a tree is from counting its rings? Well, it turns out that you can learn more than just its age. Trees live and grow largely in response to their environments. If there's a year without very much rain, a tree might not grow as much as it would during a year that had closer to an average amount of precipitation. This type of response is reflected in its rings. So if researchers know what year a tree was cut down, they can use the rings to count backwards and see which years may have experienced severe droughts or other climatic events. When combined with other archaeological evidence, that type of information can be extremely helpful in piecing together a more complete story of past human life. We mentioned before how big an impact carbon has on climate change today. Naturally, bioarchaeologists would want to be able to study carbon levels in order to understand climate change in the past. Luckily for them, there's a little scientific process known as radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating, also known as carbon-14 dating, can be used to figure out the age of organic materials like wood, bone, hair, soil, seeds, pollen, and more. This is thanks to the carbon cycle, which allows carbon to be present in all living things and their surroundings. Here's how the carbon cycle works. Carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, and it's absorbed and used by plants during photosynthesis. Plants expel oxygen, which is used in animal respiration. Animals then exhale carbon dioxide, renewing the cycle. Plants can also be consumed by animals, transferring the carbon from one organism to another. When plants and animals die, they're removed from the cycle. Then other organisms assist in the decomposition of the dead organism, passing carbon back into the soil. This carbon in the ground can be processed in plants again through the roots, or it can become a fossil fuel, which when burned by humans deposits more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon-14 dating focuses on the decomposition part of the carbon cycle, or the lack thereof. When an organism dies, its carbon-14 levels decay at a known rate. This means that researchers can determine the amount of carbon within, let's say, a human bone, then calculate how much carbon has been lost, allowing them to figure out how long ago the person died. Bioarchaeologists can use similar methods with other organic compounds like oxygen, potassium, uranium, chlorine, and more to make inferences about the natural composition of the planet in the past. Another form of evidence that can literally tell us what the climate was like at a given time is historical documentation. Humans have been keeping records of their lives for thousands of years through writing, hieroglyphs, art and drawings, and numeric systems. At one point in time, someone may have kept a journal describing a dry season and how their family or community may have suffered as a result. Someone else may have kept a tax record indicating through numbers that in a certain year there were fewer products available for taxation than at another time. These are two very different examples of documentation, but they could both be used to understand climate at a given time and how it affects human life. Of course, any information recorded by humans is at risk of being biased by the authors, as well as possibly subjected to researcher bias. There are also plenty of societies that had no known system of record keeping. This is why it's important to always look at multiple lines of evidence within the field of bioarchaeology.